The city was calm just moments ago, but now it shakes as an unknown force looms overhead. Buildings tremble in warning. Suddenly, a massive robotic beast crashes into the streets below, shattering the ground. Dust clouds rise as chaos begins. A monstrous metallic wolf stands, its glowing blue eyes surveying the area. Its powerful stance radiates destruction waiting to unfold. Red and his team arrive just in time, leaping forward. It finally revealed itself, Red thinks, adrenaline surging through him. Red reminds his team, protect the civilians first. They nod. No matter the enemy, safeguarding lives remains their top priority. Red channels fiery energy into his blade, the flames engulfing him. His focus sharpens. This will take all his strength. With a roar, Red swings his flaming sword downward. The weapon burns bright like the sun, crashing into the enemy. The ground shakes violently, flames erupting where the metallic beast stood. Red clenches his fist, shouting, "Let's finish this together!" Suddenly, a warning echoes. Blue yells, "Red, watch out!" The beast's core glows, its hidden power surging through the fractured earth. Red and Blue sprint as the ground cracks beneath them. "Dodge!" Blue shouts, pulling Red just before the pavement collapses. Red grimaces, trying to stand. "Ugh!" He pushes through the pain. This isn't over yet. The team still needs him. Blue rushes forward, shield raised, shouting, "Dodge it, everyone!" Civilians behind him scatter as the ground shakes violently again. The team pivots to shield the people. Red watches, determination burning through exhaustion. They can't fail. Not now, not ever. Red turns, locking eyes on the civilians huddled together. His heartbeat quickens. This battle is far bigger than themselves. Blue lunges at the beast again, his energy surging like thunder. "We're not backing down," he mutters as the fight rages on. Red grits his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. "This can't be. It's too strong," he mutters under his breath. He turns to the team, desperate for an answer. "What do we do now?" His voice trembles with frustration and resolve. The robotic beast charges, shaking the ground. Red barely blocks the attack, stumbling backward. "This is getting out of hand." Yellow and green step forward. "We'll save Blue ourselves," they shout, dashing toward their injured teammate. The team can't fall apart. The beast roars, its core glowing violently again. A deep hum echoes as its energy intensifies, threatening another devastating strike. The metallic beast suddenly releases a blinding beam, cutting through buildings. Red sprints ahead, dodging debris as everything explodes around him. Red leaps high into the air, sword gripped tight. Flames trail behind him as he aims for the monster's core. The impact shakes the earth. Red's fiery slash collides with the beast's armor, cracking it open. "You're not taking us down!" Smoke billows as the robotic beast stumbles, sparks flying. Red pushes on, determined. They only get one shot to end this. The monster retaliates, screeching with renewed force. From behind, a glowing projectile launches. The team braces as another attack nears. The beast's claws scrape the ground, eyes glowing furiously. "It's now or never!" Red yells, gathering all his remaining strength. A distant voice echoes. "Finish it off. It's your prey." Red hears it faintly, his body moving before his mind catches up. Red roars, surging forward with a final burst of speed. He slashes his flaming blade, aiming straight for the core. "Machina laser ready!" Yellow shouts as the team lines up, weapons glowing. Energy surges and unites, radiating bright across the sky. "Fire!" Red commands, voice resolute. The combined attack explodes forward, consuming the beast. It roars one last time before collapsing, defeated. A brilliant explosion erupts across the battlefield, flames reaching sky high. The metallic beast's core finally gives out, crumbling under the force. The shockwave ripples through the city. Buildings shake, rubble falls, and the once mighty beast lies shattered in a smoking heap. Red watches the aftermath, shoulders heaving from exhaustion. The bright sky above contrasts with the wreckage below. Phew, that was close. He removes his helmet and wipes sweat from his brow. "We owe you one again," Red says with a faint smile. "Thanks, Crimson Hammer." Red looks up, the team's efforts shining brightly in his mind. Today, their teamwork saved countless lives. From a distance, she sighs, brushing off flames from her shoulders. "Jeez." The battle was over, but the tension lingered. The robotic core continues glowing faintly, sparks flickering. A hum rises, threatening to reignite. Everyone braces, sensing something isn't right again. A burst of flames erupts as she prepares another strike. "Not again," she mutters, gathering her energy to deal the final blow. Her attack pierces through the core, silencing it once and for all. "I told you not to call me that." Helicopters hover over the city, police lines drawn. The day was saved, but the looming shadows of future monsters remain. Amidst the rubble, Red kneels down and pulls a child from the debris. "I found a survivor," he calls out urgently. Soldiers begin clearing the area. "We've got it under control now, you can head back," one of them says reassuringly to Red. Red stands up, hesitant. "I'll help out a bit more before leaving." His heart still aches for the countless lives disrupted. The soldier places a hand on his shoulder. "Your role as an awakener is complete, the rest is up to us." Red looks toward the horizon, determination flickering in his eyes. "Still, I want to," he begins, unwilling to rest just yet. An angry voice cuts through the air. Red barely dodges a flying object hurled at him. "Fuck off!" a civilian screams. Egg splatters against Red's helmet, running down his face. His mind races. Awakeners? Monsters? Are we just tools to them now? A crowd yells, accusing them of destruction. "You're taking us for idiots!" Red stays silent, guilt tightening like a knot in his chest. The setting sun colors the scene crimson. Red's fists clench at the accusations. "Stop hauling these monsters around and destroying everything." Red exhales sharply as another voice breaks through. "Don't just stand there." He turns, nodding to his ally. "Let's get going." Red picks up an old envelope, dusting it off. Awakener identification, Crimson Hammer. The words sting more than they reassure. "All right, Crim." She stops mid-sentence. "Sorry." Red glances at her, his thoughts heavy, but he smiles faintly. "It's fine, Haram. The world now calls them awakeners, heroes or monsters. It depends on the crowd. The weight of expectations has never felt heavier." A memory hits him. Haram, weapon glowing, clashed with creatures unlike anything the world had seen before. She fought relentlessly, unyielding. Flames and steel collided as Haram's powerful strike shattered the creature's defenses. She stood tall, the light from her weapon blazing. One day, strange monsters started appearing on Earth. The narration echoes in his mind as Red watches Haram push herself to the limit. Simultaneously, humans across the globe awakened. Power surged through ordinary lives, turning them into weapons of hope or destruction overnight. A colossal beast rises, roaring under the moonlight. Haram leaps into the fray, energy crackling through her strikes like lightning on water. She tears through the battlefield, each blow fueled by purpose. The monstrous enemy collapses, trembling under the combined assault of the Awakeners. Red watches from afar as her hammer shatters the monster's core. Energy erupts like a beacon in the night sky. People whispered that the Awakeners brought the monsters upon them. Haram soared forward, facing a monstrous beast whose roar shook the ground. The creature loomed large with its sharp jaws snapping. Haram, undeterred, leapt to meet it midair, weapon raised to strike hard. As the massive beast lunged, the world seemed to blur. Haram swung her hammer, her determination shining against overwhelming odds and fear. Despite discrimination and anger directed at her kind, Haram kept moving forward. In the shadows, her resolve burned brighter than ever before. The heroes, like Haram, never stopped. Amid screams and chaos, her strikes lit up the night, shattering the beast's monstrous defenses. The beast roared as Haram's hammer connected, shattering its head in a burst of energy. The sky echoed with the explosion. Even as Haram fought to protect everyone, people only saw destruction. Signs demanding Awakeners be punished littered the streets she once saved. The sunset burned crimson as Haram stood atop the defeated beast. Behind her, whispers and jeers called her heroism a curse. "Monsters or Awakeners, you're all the same," a man yelled. His gaze was sharp, his words hitting harder than any monster's claws. Haram's face remained stoic, but the paint smeared across her cheeks said it all. "Get out of our city," they cried. Crowds shouted with anger, fists raised. "The government should exile all Awakeners." Their words echoed as Haram walked away, shoulders visibly heavy. "It's the same as always," Haram thought, stepping away from the chaos. The sunset painted her path, though the world refused to change. She stood still, watching the horizon where light met shadows. "I assumed things would change as time passed," she reflected quietly. 30 years later, the world had survived. Cities stood tall again, and people gathered, recounting a history forged through endless battles. A broadcast celebrated, "It has been 30 years since the other worlds invaded. Heroes have worked together to protect peace ever since." A TV host announces, "Here we have the protagonist of that video." The camera focuses on a calm, composed Dong-hoon Kim. "The retired hero Dong-hoon Kim," the crowd murmurs, impressed yet curious. "His battles are legendary, but so are their consequences." "That was the strongest monster to date," the host adds. Dong-hoon's mind flashes to the destruction and lives caught in the chaos. Dong-hoon sees the battle replaying in his mind. The fight left scars not just on the city, but on its people too. The host presses on. "I hear you received backlash from civilians." Dong-hoon sighs, nodding. "It was their homes and lives we disrupted." "There must be a reason why Awakeners get selected," Dong-hoon continues. and why we must keep fighting, no matter the cost. A memory resurfaces, Haram, her weapon glowing, charging into battle. For reasons we can't explain in words or numbers, we keep going. Haram strikes hard, her attacks ripping through the monstrous enemy. She understands. If they don't fight, no one else will. The city shakes as Haram's blows rain down. Buildings tremble, rubble falls, but she fights on. Please bear with us, just longer. Dong-hoon concludes, humanity has survived for thousands of years, but our story as awakeners has only just begun. It's far from over. From the shadows, a monster looms large. Haram stands ready, watching its approach through the haze. Jeez, she mutters in frustration. The beast lunges forward, but Haram leaps into action. How annoying, she sighs, her massive hammer glowing with unrelenting energy. She swings, her strikes carving through the air. The power from her hammer explodes, pushing the beast back. She never falters. The enemy roars, its form shifting and claws slashing. Haram spins midair, channeling her power into one last devastating swing. Her glowing hammer connects, releasing an explosion of energy. The monster crumbles as Haram lands with quiet resolve. The fight isn't over yet. Haram's hammer smashes into the enemy, freezing the air with raw energy. The explosion echoes as shards scatter across the battlefield. She pauses, eyes narrowing. Something feels off. Her expression shifts, and for a moment the resolve cracks into brief concern. Raising her hand to her communicator, Haram stays focused. Now, please move away. Her voice carries authority through the chaos. A helicopter hovers above, its engines humming. Good work, Crimson Hammer, a voice calls from inside. The evacuation begins in earnest. Inside the helicopter, a team confirms, the final makeup check is done. Haram nods. It's time to descend. The fight isn't over yet. Wind Magician Green, a voice announces triumphantly. The sky clears as Green arrives, elegant and confident, twirling her weapon. Thankfully, Crimson Hammer has taken care of a lot of the monsters, Green says cheerfully, landing gracefully on the ground. A metal wire lashes through the air. Green grabs it mid-flight, her face lighting up with a playful but determined smile. Green on her way to serve justice. She lands with a loud stomp, ready to join the ongoing fight alongside the team. Her green boots hit the ground, dust rising. Let's finish this, she declares with conviction, energy radiating as her power flares brightly. Good work, Sunbae, Green says, giving a slight nod to Haram. Thank you for your work, Crimson Hammer, she adds respectfully. You'll receive your payment via bank transfer, a voice says over the radio. Heroes now fight not just for glory, but survival. Kids these days, an older team member mutters, watching Green's youthful energy as she leaps into action with her staff glowing. The crowd cheers, and a screen flashes. It's a go on Green's final showing. Her colorful appearance captivates everyone watching. Check it out, a spectator shouts. It's Green. Another smiles. Looks like she's big enough to show up on TV now. At a quiet table, a man smiles. It's pretty cool to see her on TV, he says, watching Green fight. You've been a fan of hers for a while, right? His friend teases. He laughs. That's right, a girl like her, so cool. Geez, you're making me jealous, his friend grumbles, poking at her food. Stop watching TV and eat up, she snaps with a grin. Haram's eyes widen in irritation. She mutters under her breath, glaring at the broadcast. Seriously, kids these days? Her frustration grows. How dare they call themselves heroes when they mug it up for the camera? She yells. They'll hear you, Haram, Dong-hoon replies calmly. Dong-hoon leans back, curious. By the way, why aren't you transforming back? We're already done with work. No need to stay that way. Haram's face turns serious. I can't turn back. She looks away, hiding a faint sadness behind her stubborn demeanor. My very essence became a magical girl after transforming so much, she admits. I can't undo it, even if I want to. Dong-hoon listens quietly as Haram continues. I transferred a few weeks ago after getting discharged from the military. I've been like this since. Her voice softens. I rejected being a magical girl at first, but after transforming permanently, my mindset changed. I stopped regretting. Dong-hoon smiled, laughing as he picked up his chopsticks. The past weighed heavily on their shoulders, but moments like this softened it. The sizzling sound of food on the grill filled the quiet space. Complaints weren't always complaints. Sometimes they were unspoken truths. Dong-hoon leaned back, watching Haram quietly. Their years of battles had forged an understanding. They'd seen the world change, yet stayed together. Two glasses clinked in the golden light. No matter what changes, Dong-hoon thought, Haram never wavers. Some things were constant, like her. Under the dim streetlights, Haram stood silently as Dong-hoon offered to walk her home. His words sounded calm but carried genuine concern. Haram smiled faintly, brushing off his offer. It's okay, I'll be fine on my own. Dong-hoon laughed, easing the tension between them. As he waved and left, the street fell silent again. A lone light flickered, painting Haram's figure under its narrow spotlight. Haram exhaled, looking at the empty road ahead. That should be my line, she thought, a quiet weight pulling on her. Her gaze lifted to the stars, eyes filled with longing. I'm the one who needed someone to talk to tonight. Dong-hoon stumbled down the uneven stone stairs, humming a familiar tune. The night air was crisp, carrying the echoes of his steps. He paused mid-step, tilting his head toward a faint rustling sound. He squinted into the shadows, sensing something was slightly off. Dong-hoon straightened up as a figure emerged from the dark alley, its presence silent but unsettling. His pulse quickened instinctively. A chill ran through him as he stared at the towering shadow. The darkness swallowed its features, leaving only a creeping dread. The figure lunged forward suddenly, its movements sharp and unnatural. Dong-hoon froze, unable to finish his words as crimson slashes painted the night. Rain poured relentlessly as the world mourned. Today they lost a hero, a man who held humanity together when everything shattered. Under the weight of dark clouds, Dong-hoon Kim's portrait sat solemnly, surrounded by white chrysanthemums. The people wept as thunder rumbled. 30 years ago, the speaker continued, Dong-hoon stood against the other world's invasion. While the world crumbled, he gave us hope. Even when others faltered, Dong-hoon's resolve never wavered. Fighting until his very last breath, he collapsed in a cold alleyway alone. Now they gathered under one promise, to honor his legacy. A world where heroes and humans coexist must not be a dream. The funeral procession moved forward slowly, shadows of umbrellas blending with the storm. His sacrifice weighed heavily on every step taken. The rain, almost mourning alongside them, drenched the silent crowd. A few hands reached out but found nothing to cling to. Amidst the rows of mourners, a lone figure stood still. The grave awaited. Flowers lay forgotten at its base, drenched and wilted. Rumors began to spread. A death too sudden, a collapse too odd. Notes appeared suggesting Dong-hoon had been targeted for years. Pages flew like whispers on the wind, words accusing shadows and power. Some even said his fate was inevitable, anticipated but not prevented. But reality was crueler. From the darkness, a man laughed. Yes, I killed him. That hero deserved no sympathy. Heroes bring nothing but pain, he spat, fists shaking. The anger in his voice seemed more dangerous than any monster they'd faced. The world listened in silence as he accused the fallen. Disasters come because of you. Heroes invite chaos to our lives. For the first time, hatred for heroes became undeniable. From someone they protected came words like venom, leaving everyone speechless. What was the hero association if not a shield? If even Dong-hoon's sacrifice bred resentment, then who was left to fight for humanity? Whispers spread like wildfire through the darkness. Death is better than wasting taxes on his pension. Shadows spoke harsh truths without remorse. 30 years is too long, someone murmured coldly. It's about time he left. Their words echoed, slicing through the weight of loss. A news anchor delivered rehearsed sympathy. May the hero rest in peace, and we must carry his will forward. His tone felt empty. Anonymous donations streamed in with robotic messages. Thank you for your service, they typed, as if saving the world had a price tag. Finally, the quiet returned. Crimson Hammer, watching from a distance, sighed softly. For once, even the noise of grief had stilled. Haram's foot stepped forward, pressing into the grass. In her hand, a ribbon dangled loosely, carrying the weight of unspoken memories. The sky darkened, swirling ominously. Black clouds spread like ink, casting an unnatural shadow as Haram stood still, lost in thought. A distant metallic sound echoed, snapping her focus. Her crimson eyes narrowed sharply as the sudden noise disturbed the eerie calm. She looked up at the city skyline. The lamplight flickered, its glow trembling under the growing storm that now loomed overhead. It's begun, Haram whispered softly to herself, her silver hair swaying. She watched the horizon, ready for whatever came next. He paused for a moment, his gaze softening. Memories of the past came flooding back, clashing with the bitter truth of his present reality. Black clouds swirled above, thick and unnatural. Crimson Hammer tightened his grip on the ribbon in his hand, sensing that something was approaching. The distant sound of thunder snapped his thoughts. He looked up sharply, his red eyes narrowing. This wasn't an ordinary storm. A faint glow from the city skyline pierced through the dark clouds. The night had fallen, but this time it felt eerily alive. Crimson Hammer stopped walking and turned. His silver hair swayed as wind howled through the field, signaling that the calm was finally breaking. Two figures stood silently against the bright white void. Crimson Hammer and the silver-haired hero watched the storm of fate approach. Crimson Hammer shifted his gaze slightly toward the other. His posture was still as if waiting for a signal or an unseen answer. The silver-haired hero said nothing, her crimson eyes glowing softly. The silence between them carried the weight of all unspoken emotions. Turning his head fully, Crimson Hammer's visor reflected faint sparks of flames rising nearby. A dangerous resolve began to simmer beneath the quiet. Fire exploded behind him, consuming the air with its intensity. Crimson Hammer's body lit up like a burning ember ready for war. The silver-haired hero stood tall amidst the flames, unmoved. Her figure burned into the horizon, a vision of quiet strength against chaos. The flicker of the fire danced in her eyes, memories of battles and betrayals. Without hesitation, she took a firm step forward. The flames faded behind her as she walked, calm but purposeful. Her resolve was as sharp as her words. The world was watching. A shadow tore through the sky, slamming into the ground with an ear-piercing crash. Across the rooftops, war machines began their descent. The green-armored enemy struggled to its feet, battered but alive. It looked up only to face the sheer, overwhelming power above. Crimson Hammer's fist ignited in fiery energy as he rushed forward, striking without mercy. The earth trembled beneath the weight of his blow. The force sent shockwaves into the air, scattering rubble and dust. His attacks carried the rage of years spent fighting without gratitude. Watching from a distance, the silver-haired hero sighed. Weakness wasn't in physical strength alone, it lay in the heart of a crumbling society. As the dust settled, she stood on cracked concrete, her gaze focused. Crimson Hammer continued fighting, but the battle had already taken its toll. She muttered one word under her breath: weak. Humanity's dependence on heroes was their greatest strength, but also their deepest flaw. The green-haired warrior's blade sparked as she struck, but her power wavered. Against a simple monster, she struggled to hold her ground. Crimson Hammer watched from a distance. His expression remained cold as he thought, a hero at the end of their story. The silver-haired hero's gaze sharpened. Is having trouble with a mere B-rank monster now the limit of today's heroes? Her words lingered like frost, cutting through the air. The ease with which the world accepted weakness sickened her to the core. A blinding beam of light split the sky, a terrifying memory resurfacing. They all remembered where their complacency had led them. The great disaster. 10 years ago, it began with a flash of white light, cutting the world apart like a cruel blade. People had stood frozen in awe, watching the heavens split open. Their cheers of amazement masked the horror that followed. The streets turned crimson. Red light erupted as monsters poured through, engulfing the earth in flames and despair. The disaster began. Crimson Hammer remembered the chaos, the screams and ash that filled the air. Heroes fought relentlessly, but their efforts barely slowed the invasion. This can't go on, the silver-haired hero muttered, standing alone on shattered ground. Energy surged around her, radiating raw determination. Today the last hero died. Her words echoed as her body pulsed with overwhelming power. There would be no more patience for weakness. A green-haired figure interrupted, shouting, "Who are you? Why are you stealing my kill?" The silver-haired hero didn't even glance at her. Crimson eyes burned with quiet fury as she focused on the enemy. Power surged from her stance, shaking the ground beneath her feet. With a flash of red, she vanished into motion. Her blade struck faster than the eye could follow, ending the monster in one swing. The ground trembled as her crimson energy spread outward, a silent declaration. Weakness will no longer be forgiven, her very presence seemed to say. Under the harsh spotlight, the silver-haired hero stood like a judge, her crimson eyes glaring down at the defeated green-haired fighter. Only clowns are left, she thought bitterly. The sound of her whip echoed like thunder as laughter twisted into screams around her. Red energy slashed the darkness, cutting through silence like a blade. Her anger burned brighter than ever. Humanity cannot be saved this way. The green-haired warrior froze, trembling. The hero's words stabbed deeper than the whip. I will show the world what justice really means. Under the pale moonlight, her red coat gleamed. Her face was shadowed, but her stance spoke volumes. I will not tolerate failure. I will teach them. Her voice echoed in the void, a declaration of war. Crimson energy lashed outward like an unstoppable force. How to be heroes. Those words shattered the night, their weight carrying judgment that no one could ignore. The city watched in silence. A quiet moment passed. The world seemed to hold its breath. The sky loomed heavy as if awaiting what would come next. Outside her apartment window, the quiet hum of the city persisted. A new night had begun, but something darker simmered beneath it. In the small room, a familiar sound broke the silence. A white cat, Pollo, peeked from under a blanket, eyes wide. The silver-haired hero entered the room, her aura dark and foreboding. Poyo's tail twitched nervously, sensing the unfamiliar energy around her. "I thought I was going to starve to death," Poyo remarked as he trotted toward her. His carefree tone filled the silence. She stood at the door, dark energy swirling like a storm. Her shadow stretched long behind her as Poyo paused, suddenly cautious. "Poyo?" Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that froze him in place. He stared up at her uneasy. Purple energy surrounded her figure like smoke, her crimson gaze piercing. "You feel a lot different," Poyo whispered, eyes filled with dread. Poyo stared at the silver-haired hero, his round eyes full of confusion. The swirling dark energy around her left him speechless. An hour prior, Crimson Hammer's blade hit the ground with a resounding thud, as if marking the fate of the green-haired warrior. The injured hero trembled, glaring up at her opponent. Just who are you?" Her voice cracked, a mix of fear and anger. Tears streamed down her face as she yelled, "Why are you doing this to me? Just why?" Her voice echoed in the silence. The silver-haired hero stood over her, cold and unfeeling. The crimson glow in her eyes revealed nothing but a hardened resolve. "I won't be killing you," she added, stepping closer. Her blade hummed with restrained energy as the air grew heavier around her. In the present, Poyo lay sprawled out, his fluffy white tail twitching. "How brutal," he said lazily. "Did she die?" The silver-haired hero leaned back against the bed frame. "Of course not. I just made sure she couldn't be active for a while." She continued without remorse. "I bent her arms and broke her legs. She'll survive, but that's the extent of my mercy." Poyo stared at her wide-eyed. "I see," he mumbled. Then, breaking the silence, he stood up. No, you need to repent quickly." "Repent for what?" she muttered, unbothered, as she covered her eyes with her arm. Her voice was soft, but it carried exhaustion. Poyo hesitated, looking at her carefully. "Is it because of Dong-hoon?" he asked, his tone more serious this time, breaking through the quiet. Silence hung in the air. The silver-haired hero remained still, her crimson eyes hidden beneath the shadow of her hand. Poyo's voice softened. "Many people sacrificed themselves these past 30 years. He stepped closer to her, his small paws barely making a sound. "But you were always just Haram." His words lingered in the room. The hero said nothing, lost in her thoughts, the weight of history pressing down. Lying on the bed, the silver-haired hero stared at the ceiling. "It's because, rather than a monster, a human killed him." Her crimson eyes narrowed with memories of Dong-hoon's death. Poyo silently jumped down, tail swishing nervously as the air grew heavy. "All right, Poyo," she muttered, her tone unchanging. "I didn't see or hear anything. Just go wash the smell of blood off." Poyo hesitated, watching her closely. "I'll give you a present," she added quietly before the room fell into an unsettling silence. Water dripped into a basin, now stained with crimson streaks. The ripples broke as if carrying whispers of unspoken guilt. "It's all done," said a faint voice. In a dim room, blue magic swirled, glowing with energy. Someone stood ready at its center. "With your weapon at the center and a magical girl's will to strive forward," the voice explained, "a new power will awaken." The silver-haired figure watched the ethereal glow rise like waves. Stars dotted the air, wrapping her in threads of celestial light. "For a hero who wishes to bring justice, a new power will be given," the voice echoed, resonating in the magic around her. The figure moved through the glowing energy, her steps slow but deliberate. The force pulsed like a heartbeat, calling her forward. "Please answer!" the voice pleaded, urgency trembling in its tone. Magic surged, pulling the light tighter around her form. Threads of energy swirled like a storm as her figure blurred. A glimpse of her crimson eyes pierced through the shroud of power. In the heart of the storm, her red whip clanged against the ground. The weapon absorbed the glow, merging with its brilliance. The silver-haired hero emerged, her transformation complete. Her uniform glowed with refined energy, and the threads of light flowed like her resolve. "It's been 30 years, she whispered, her words trailing off. Her crimson gaze burned with purpose as she prepared to face the future. A voice echoed through the haze. "You're a lot muddier this time." The light blurred as a figure reached toward Poyo. Poyo tilted his head, his tail twitching in curiosity. "Hello, Poyo," the voice chimed again. "My name is Eunho." The voice grew clearer. "You've been chosen to be a magical girl. Become a hero and please save the world." The silver-haired hero stood quietly, her crimson eyes fixated on the words lingering in her mind. "Is this the path you wish for?" Her gaze dropped to her weapon, its edges worn and stained. The moment felt heavy, filled with questions that demanded an answer. A faint whisper escaped her lips. "Yeah." Her grip tightened around the weapon as her red eyes sharpened with quiet determination. "This is my answer," she declared firmly. Magic swirled around her, vibrant threads of energy spiraling upward in brilliant waves of blue. The magic erupted, filling the room with blinding light. Poyo watched in awe as her figure stood strong in the glowing storm. Meanwhile, elsewhere, darkness converged. Another figure emerged, her aura shadowed in violet energy. Her black uniform radiated a dangerous power. The news broke across the city. Another hero was defeated today, a reporter announced. No monsters were reported in the area. His life isn't in danger, but he'll have difficulty being active for a while, the report continued, as paramedics carried someone away. Nearby, two civilians stood behind yellow tape. The higher-ups made their decision, one muttered. We can't do much now, can we? The camera panned to cracked rubble, and carved into the broken stones were chilling words, show your own will. The words lingered in the air like a challenge. Those who have not suffered do not consider themselves heroes, the message declared. The ground beneath the words was stained in blood, a haunting symbol of the rising tension between heroes, humanity, and justice itself. A dark figure crouched on the rooftop, hair flowing. The air was silent, except for the tension hanging heavily around her. Below, sirens blared. An ambulance rushed to a chaotic scene, but the figure barely flinched. Too slow, she thought, unimpressed. Her exhale was sharp as her eyes scanned the distance. Ha! Days like this made her question people's competence. She looked at her phone. The live stream notification blinked. Let's go flying. It wasn't a game anymore. It was real. Eyes narrowed, she tapped on the screen. Something sparked inside her. This wasn't entertainment. It was a call to act. The live stream buzzed with live footage of a monster expedition. 2,321 viewers watched, unaware their casual curiosity might turn deadly. A confident streamer appeared on screen, waving energetically. What's up, everyone? He announced his plans, clueless about the danger lurking ahead. I've just arrived! Bong Hyun grinned at the camera. His bravado blinded him to the ominous energy seeping through the forest. He thanked his viewers for donations as monsters loomed silently in the distance. Their growing presence felt unnatural, unspoken, and deadly. Suddenly, a dark streak shot through the air, slamming a creature into the ground. The stream shook violently. Chaos had begun. The streamer froze, baffled. Eh? His voice cracked, smile gone. The chat exploded with confused messages. What was that? The viewers were in shambles. Failed, got found out. Nobody knew what had happened, except for her. This wasn't a mistake. Smoke rose. She landed, her presence shrouded in shadows. A moment passed before Bong Hyun's panicked voice echoed. Who's there? She stepped forward. The wind pulled at her cloak. Are you the monster's true form? Her glare pierced through his fear. No response. Her patience cracked. Energy crackled in her palm as she lunged forward. Silence wasn't an option anymore. A strike fell with precision, and the monstrous figure was hit hard. The ground trembled as dust swirled violently around. Bong Hyun's eyes widened as his helmet shifted. He choked, his bravado gone, leaving behind only pure panic and confusion. The live stream flickered, chaotic messages popping up. In the center of it all, the dark figure advanced without hesitation. One viewer sent a donation asking if Bong Hyun was okay. Meanwhile, the streamer could only stare blankly at the camera. Viewers watched, half in awe, half horrified. Bong Hyun slumped, leaving the livestream confused and alive with chatter about what just happened. The girl glanced at the screen and scoffed. How's it already blowing up? My stream hasn't even started yet. Comments poured in rapidly, questioning what just happened. Ignoring them, she tilted her head, amused. The real show had barely begun. Hit that like and subscribe button! Her mocking tone felt heavy. She wanted attention, but not for their shallow entertainment. Her weapon slashed the air again with terrifying speed, leaving trails of purple energy and sparks that cut through silence. A news update blared. Hero Bong Hyun's first broadcast disrupted by a mysterious attacker. The figure vanished before anyone could blink. Standing in the shadows, the girl listened to the news. Her cold expression reflected none of the chaos she'd caused. After reviewing the channel and examining footage, the mysterious figure appears to be a lunatic. The announcer's voice dripped with caution. Her eyes narrowed dangerously, her aura intensifying. Hearing herself dismissed so casually only fueled the storm already building inside her. What? She muttered under her breath, her grip tightening. A building nearby cracked, the sound echoing across the silent street. Somewhere in the chaos, a shaky voice called out, "Please calm down, Poyo!" But no one, not even the announcer, was safe. With a final exhale, she turned away. For now, she wouldn't quit, but the storm brewing around her was far from over. She stepped forward, her movements deliberate. The air grew heavier around her, tension spreading like ripples in a pond. Her shadow loomed unnaturally large in the dim room, embodying the weight of her emotions. The silence screamed louder than any words. Thoughts twisted through her mind, memories and doubts tangled together. Even with resolve, the walls seemed to close in on her. Somewhere else, life went on as normal. Voices laughed and cheered over drinks, ignorant of the quiet storm building in her. A group raised their mugs high, celebrating their survival. The world they fought to protect had already moved forward without her. The clatter of glasses echoed through the room, a mockery of her silence. Joy felt so far away from where she stood. Smiles froze mid-photo, capturing a moment of happiness. Somewhere in that image was the life she used to understand, now unreachable. The photo sat forgotten on her table, its edges stark against the empty white surface. Her expression remained blank, unchanging. Her hands tightened at her sides. Whatever joy they felt now was temporary. She knew it. They all did. The faint sound of the wind pressing against the window filled the room. She remained still, her eyes fixed on nothing. A soft nudge broke her trance. She tensed but didn't look up, the storm inside her still unrelenting and unresolved. Her gaze flicked briefly to the weapon resting on her desk, sharp and familiar. It was a promise and a burden. Outside, the wind screamed louder. It carried unspoken words and unanswered questions, reflecting her growing determination beneath the weariness she hid. She turned away, her steps steady but heavy. The fight wasn't over, and whatever storm waited outside, she was ready to meet it. The small creature tugged at her arm, but she walked away calmly, her footsteps echoing like a drumbeat through the quiet hall. She stopped at the door, turning briefly. Her expression softened as if making a promise before leaving the safety of the room. Outside, the world felt bright and sharp. Her gaze lifted toward the power lines as the wind whispered an ominous warning. The alley stretched ahead, shadowed and narrow. Her steps didn't falter, though each corner seemed to hide eyes waiting in silence. A towering figure blocked her path, his voice a low growl. The sharp glare in her eyes didn't waver one bit. Her voice cut through his bravado, confident and clear. Every step closer rattled him as if her calm masked something deadly. The shark-like figure leaned in, his curiosity sparking into anger. He couldn't understand the weight of her presence and why it threatened him. Her piercing gaze froze him in place. A sharp chill hung in the air as though time itself had paused for her. Unable to contain his pride, he lunged. But her movement was a blur, graceful and controlled, like a predator on the hunt. His impact rattled the ground, leaving a crater where he fell. She watched calmly, as if he were a minor inconvenience. Inside a dark, imposing room, a shadowy figure waited. News of the commotion reached him, and his patience cracked like glass. The faint sound of footsteps echoed as she approached. Every eye in the room turned toward her, drawn to her quiet power. His massive frame loomed in the darkness, eyes glowing like embers. "White-haired woman," he muttered, his voice a deep growl of recognition. The ceiling trembled slightly, his anger radiating outward. The girl's steady resolve only seemed to heighten the looming threat of his fury. A subordinate quivered at his side, but he dared not look up. The presence she brought was enough to shake them all. She leaned back casually, her expression calm but sharp. The air crackled with tension as her opponent considered her unexpected strength. The figure spoke with forced composure, his glowing eyes betraying his frustration. Her presence alone had already disrupted their fragile hierarchy. She smirked, her confidence unwavering. It was clear she was no ordinary threat, and even her enemies struggled to comprehend her purpose. "The hammer has come," echoed ominously. Whispers of her presence spread through the room, filling it with unease and quiet fear. The question hung heavy. Why had she come? Their power, their money? It didn't interest her. Yet she remained unmoved. A bottle sat between them, untouched. A standoff of sorts, where the true weight of the conversation hid beneath the surface. She relaxed further, eyes sharp as she explained herself. The monster she sought wasn't like any they'd faced before. Her words cut through the tension. A creature that could transform, an evolving threat, was reason enough for her sudden arrival. The shadowy figure listened carefully. Monsters with self-awareness were dangerous, uncontrollable forces. Her intent to hunt them made her unpredictable. He hesitated, calculating her words. The risks were high, but something about her confidence pushed him toward reluctant agreement. A threat flared from him, a warning that she could be ejected back to the other world. She remained unfazed, even amused. Her response was blunt and unshaken, as if she'd already seen through every trick he could throw. She wasn't leaving yet. He leaned back, frustrated but resigned. "How will we contact you?" The question came reluctantly, like a forced surrender. Without hesitation, she handed over her phone. Even a criminal organization couldn't find comfort in her unpredictable, persistent presence. A smile tugged at her lips. For now, they had no choice but to work with her, whether they liked it or not. The shadowed figure's eyes narrowed sharply, energy flaring around him. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly or confidently. She stayed seated, unimpressed, while twirling a device in her hand. Her casual demeanor only deepened the growing tension in the room. After a long pause, she leaned back with a sigh. As though working with him was a tedious inevitability she accepted. She lifted her drink to her lips, eyes half-lidded with boredom. It was clear she had all the control now. Across from her, he bristled internally. Frustration clawed at him, unspoken thoughts boiling just beneath the surface of his icy composure. The glass in his hand trembled slightly as he mentioned the news. Something bigger was happening, though she already knew. A shadow passed across her face, her usual calm replaced by something sharper. Her power sparked, flickering like a distant storm. Energy coiled around her as the air thickened. The shadows darkened, wrapping around her figure like an ominous, sentient aura. His realization hit like a blow. This was no ordinary problem. Heroes were under attack, and her involvement was no coincidence. As she loomed above him, her calm words cut like a knife. Whatever came next would reshape their fragile balance completely. The large room sat in eerie silence as Haram Lee stepped away. The towering figure watched her carefully, calculating her every move. His glowing eyes narrowed with a hint of warning. The weight of his words lingered, a reminder of the fragile balance. Her expression was calm, though her crimson gaze burned coldly. Whatever alliances existed, they would vanish if survival was ever threatened. She turned slowly, her silhouette swallowed by shadows. A final glance told him all he needed to know. This game was hers now. Haram walked confidently with the girl beside him, her steps matching his rhythm. The tension was thick, yet they moved like a team. Not a gangster, she thought, frowning as Haram trailed behind. Her irritation simmered while he lazily justified his reluctance to lead the way. Her sharp gaze cut through the air as Haram casually mentioned a name, one she hadn't heard in years but sent chills regardless. The thought of becoming chairman rattled her. Seriously? She wondered, while Haram dreamily spoke of leading some world domination society like it was nothing. They walked toward the vast facility. A massive project was underway, the machines towering high. Even she couldn't hide her surprise at its scale. The girl rolled her eyes as she recalled Haram's earlier nonsense. Pollution Treatment Association? She knew that story had holes big enough to fall through. Haram shrugged and explained. Turns out the whole thing was fake, blown to pieces by the UN like they were villains from an old movie. Her expression softened. She looked forward, thoughtful now. The Great Barrier, huh? That phrase weighed heavily, hinting at something much bigger than their banter. Haram mumbled about the troublesome octopus-like guy. The man caused headaches daily, showing up unannounced, claiming space as if he ran the entire facility. The persistent figure irritated Haram endlessly. Still, he tolerated it, though everyone knew he was one outburst away from flipping everything upside down. Haram grumbled under his breath, venting. All he wanted was to teach the stubborn intruder a lesson, maybe solve the food shortage in the process. The girl smirked at his sudden outburst. Sweet corn leftovers? She muttered the idea aloud, half joking but oddly amused by its unexpected logic. As Haram's daydream swirled, their conversation was interrupted. Someone returned, a sharp surprise cutting through the moment. Lee Haram? Back already? The girl stammered. Haram stood calmly in the doorway. I came back to ask you something, he said, brushing off the chaos like it didn't matter. Far away, workers toiled under the looming structure. Purification volunteers, Haram muttered, watching people carry boxes. The Great Barrier Project seemed far from over. Haram peeked his head around the corner with a casual, "Ah, Tilda!" The room's atmosphere shifted as the mysterious octopus-like figure entered. The figure spoke proudly of the Purification Volunteer Organization, a perfect facade that cost them nothing but gained significant reputation and respect. Why ask about the organization? The girl inquired, her suspicion sharp. She didn't expect Haram's sudden interest in their obscure dealings. Without hesitation, Haram declared his intentions. Add my name somehow. He nonchalantly poured tea, aiming for a role with more prestige. The octopus-like figure squirmed. So you're planning to embezzle? His tone turned ominous, though his assumptions clearly struck a nerve somewhere in Haram's plans. The girl rolled her eyes. You're sharp but act clueless sometimes. Her exasperation hung in the air while Haram sipped his drink. Haram, unfazed, explained calmly. A hero in a high position would deflect unwanted attention, especially from the United Nations. It made sense. His words lingered. The octopus-like figure stood in quiet thought, though the tension grew. What are you planning, really? Doubt clouded the air. The girl tilted her head. Her expression stayed unreadable, but something about Haram's sudden interest felt out of place, even to her. As she turned, her long hair flowing behind, silence lingered. It was clear she wasn't convinced, but Haram had his reasons. Haram's reasoning lingered. Contradictory or not, he thought aloud, heroes in the UN don't care much about the Great Barrier's unknowns. The monsters, once their greatest enemies, now signed up as volunteers beyond the barrier. Strange world, Haram thought, sipping his drink casually. One person stood with resolve. That's why I think I should do this even more, they stated, full of conviction and purpose. You'll cheer me on, right, Haram? The words hit differently this time. Haram's silence weighed more than the usual sarcastic replies. Alone later, Haram tried dialing a number but failed. I should have written it down. He frowned at his erased phone memory. Hello, who is this? A voice echoed through the phone. To her relief, the call connected, and she smiled with satisfaction. Hyun-sok, it's me, Haram. Got a moment? She asked cheerfully. Yet his immediate response was harsh. He wasn't lending any money this time. Haram stood silently, the wind brushing past her. She resisted the urge to snap, instead holding back her growing frustration at the misunderstanding. Don't hang up, she insisted quickly. That's not why I called. She sounded serious this time, though her tone still carried her usual bite. With the skyline behind her, Haram continued, It's not about money. I need your strength. Her request was genuine, something far beyond casual favors. There's this volunteer group, Haram began, her gaze fixed on the moonlit street, the Purification Volunteer Organization beyond the Great Barrier. Hyun-sok's typing filled the silence as he quickly checked for details. The group's name came up, verified, approved by the United Nations itself. It's a real group, he confirmed, adjusting his glasses. Hyun-sok paused, sensing Haram's tone carried something more. What's wrong with that group? He asked. Haram shook her head. No, nothing's wrong. I just want to ask if you could help them with their work. Hyun-sok listened carefully. If this benefits just one group unfairly, I'll refuse, he replied. His skepticism was clear, though he respected Haram's unusual request. Silence lingered as Hyun-sok processed her words. Haram said nothing, gripping her phone tightly, her expression unreadable beneath the cold, glowing streetlights. Even if it's Dong-hoon's request? She finally added, her voice calm but pointed. The mention of Dong-hoon made Hyun-suk pause his typing abruptly. Fingers froze over the keyboard as he considered the weight of the name. The quiet stretched longer, his expression tight with thought. Haram looked outward, memories of volunteers resurfacing. The last thing Dong-hoon did was volunteer work, she said. For the people beyond the barrier. Hyun-suk exhaled slowly. I'll consider it, he finally responded. Haram smiled faintly, satisfied. Thanks. I'll hang up now since you're probably busy, she finished softly. Hyun-suk's voice came through sharply. By the way, about the recent heroic movements. His words made Haram pause, eyes narrowing slightly. Lee Haram, were they your doing? Hyun-suk's glare from his office was direct, as if already knowing the answer before asking. No, Haram replied calmly, her voice steady. Under the dim streetlight, her denial carried weight, though her casual stance spoke otherwise. She tilted her head and smirked, her crimson eyes gleaming mischievously. Why would I do something like that? She teased playfully. Because you definitely would, Hyun-suk countered, clearly unconvinced. Her silence only fueled the suspicion, though her grin said everything he needed to know. Haram ran forward into the dark alley, her footsteps quick and calculated. Something or someone was already far ahead, drawing her attention. That person, she whispered, her eyes catching the mysterious figure's silhouette. A tailored suit and a sniper rifle gleamed under the moonlight. A suit and a sniper rifle? Haram wondered aloud. Are they a hero who specializes in guns? The thought intrigued her. Suddenly a streak of light shot through the air, illuminating the night sky. It was no ordinary sniper. The attack was overwhelming. Without hesitation, Haram leapt forward. Her form glowed against the dark sky, sword in hand, ready to close the gap between them. Take that! The iron fist of justice! A booming voice declared. The man charged forward, fists glowing with an unstoppable energy. Iron fist! He shouted again, striking down with raw power. His enthusiasm echoed through the streets, startling anyone watching from afar. I shall judge you with my ultimate final strike, he roared dramatically like a hero straight out of a cheesy Saturday cartoon. Watching from above, Haram raised an eyebrow. What a battle, she muttered, unimpressed. Is this hero training or just showing off again? Still perched high, Haram glanced elsewhere. More concerning is that woman aiming her rifle at him, she thought, her focus shifting quickly. From the rooftop, Haram observed the city spread below. Her thoughts raced, focused on the situation and the mysterious woman's moves. A massive energy beam gathered at its center, pulsating with unnatural light. Haram watched with caution. This wasn't something she could take lightly. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted like a roaring storm. A glowing artifact rose, slicing through the dark city skyline with raw force. The beam tore through the air, illuminating the cityscape as if daylight had returned. Haram steadied herself, feeling its overwhelming pressure. She leapt forward, merging into the flow of energy. The light engulfed her form, her sword gleaming as she soared downward like a comet. Mid-air, Haram locked her eyes onto the enemy. Whatever I do, she thought, letting one of mine die, that's too much. Her sword collided with the beam, energy splitting around her like violent fireworks. The sheer power sent shockwaves that rippled through the skyline. The intensity rose. Haram gritted her teeth, her body twisting in perfect synchronization with her strikes. Too much, she repeated to herself. Suddenly, a glowing red core emerged from the chaos. Her eyes widened and she exhaled sharply. "Would you look at this?" she murmured. With newfound resolve, Haram surged forward. "Now that I'm older," she muttered under her breath, "I'm a little harder to scare." Haram struck with a grin, energy rippling like a shockwave. "Golf seems pretty fun," she joked, swinging her sword with precision. The impact sent the energy flying, streaking across the night sky like a meteor. The streets below trembled from the aftermath. Watching from afar, her allies blinked in awe. "Nice shot, boss," one called out, their cheers ringing out into the cool night. The chaos drew attention. "A hero ambusher," someone shouted, their voice a mix of shock and panic. The crowd quickly began to scatter. Amidst the confusion, Haram stood tall. "Do you have the guts to stop me?" her presence seemed to say, daring anyone to try. Haram stood confidently, her sword humming with power as she faced the chaos below. Her eyes shone with unshakable determination. "At times like this, you should just say thank you, you little brat," she muttered, her voice carrying faint amusement. A sudden blow struck, and the muscular hero flew backward, completely stunned. His confidence shattered as he landed awkwardly on the ground. From a rooftop, the sniper watched in disbelief, her hands trembling. "What's going on? This can't be happening," she whispered to herself. Desperation filled the sniper's gaze as she scanned the area. "Where is she?" she murmured, realizing she'd lost sight of her target. The sniper froze as Haram appeared behind her, silent and menacing. Her body stiffened as the realization hit like a wave. Haram grabbed her effortlessly, pulling her weapon aside. "Who are you?" Haram asked calmly, though the look in her eyes was sharp as steel. The sniper stammered. She mumbled nervously, unable to form coherent words under Haram's piercing glare and overwhelming presence. "I won't kill you," Haram assured her, though her tone held a threat. "But I could send you plummeting from here." The sniper gulped audibly. Haram's grip didn't falter as she waited for answers. The weight of the moment was suffocating. "Ugh!" The sniper stammered again, her breathing uneven. She struggled to find words under Haram's cold, unwavering stare. Haram tilted her head slightly, frowning. "Stop stalling and just spit it out already." Her patience was running thin, tension crackling in the air. The sniper clenched her fists, eyes squeezed shut. I, she cried, voice trembling as if she were on the edge of breaking down. Then out of nowhere, she dropped to her knees, sparkling with sincerity. "I greatly respect you, hero ambusher," she declared, shocking everyone. Haram's expression froze in sheer disbelief. Was all she managed to react, her confident demeanor cracking at the absurdity of the moment. Lee Haram stood silently in the quiet night, her red eyes narrowed. There was something she couldn't express, but she tried. Across from her, Sniper Girl smirked coldly. "You admire heroes, don't you? But you lack the strength to act." Haram's fist trembled slightly, her glare unshaken. "So ambushing people is your way? You call this strength? This isn't what heroes do." Sniper Girl flipped her hair back casually, her tone dismissive. "Heroes today? It's all about fame. Ideals? No one's interested in that nonsense." Haram's voice rang firm, slicing through the air. "You're right. Heroes are different now, but losing your values for fame is disgraceful." For a moment, Sniper Girl's smile softened, her words calm and deceptive. "Thank you for understanding, Haram," she said, though her tone felt off. "But—" Sniper Girl's energy flared, her weapon bursting into light. She slashed forward, her strike cutting through empty air as Haram dodged. Haram's eyes widened as she landed on her feet. Sniper Girl's aura swirled unnaturally, darker and stronger. What is this power, she thought. Sniper Girl's voice turned venomous, her eyes glaring. You'll never understand, Haram. Heroes don't change the world by holding on to morals. They act. Trembling from the weight of the power, Haram shouted back, This? You call this justice? Hurting others to prove your twisted ideals? Haram's voice was steady, cutting through the cold night. You think I hate you? I don't. I just see the truth. Her grip loosened as she spoke calmly. Heroes aren't perfect, but they protect people. They maintain balance and serve society's order. Sniper Girl scoffed, crossing her arms. You're stuck in the past, Haram. Heroes today are celebrities. Money, fame, and adoration are what matter. Enough, Haram snapped, her eyes sharp. You're not raising awareness. You're just hurting people. That's selfish destruction, not heroism. Stepping forward, Haram's red eyes burned fiercely. The moment you attacked your comrades, you lost the right to call it justice. A powerful bullet surrounded by glowing blue energy hovers ominously, radiating force. The intricate magic formula embedded in it buzzes faintly. The bullet sparks wildly, pulsing with enhanced impact. Its energy crackles, illuminating the darkness. This was no ordinary attempt at harm. Two figures crouched together, Haram gripping someone's shoulder tightly. Killing isn't my intention, Haram mutters, eyes cold but carrying an unexpected softness. Despite their frustration, Haram takes a breath. I dislike modern heroes, Haram thinks, but that doesn't mean they deserve to die. The fallen girl stirs, barely able to lift her head. They're just inexperienced, Haram reflects, seeing her struggle. They lack the qualifications. As the moon glows brightly, casting shadows over the sleeping city, quiet streets are broken only by the soft hum of footsteps. A pair of soda cans tumble loudly to the ground. The sound echoes through the alley as someone shuffles closer, half humming casually. Under the dim street light, Haram appears, half sleepy, half distracted. Hands stuffed in their hoodie, Haram walks lazily, humming without much care. Suddenly, Haram throws their arms up cheerfully. I'm home, they shout to nobody in particular, their voice echoing in the silence. Behind the apartment door, someone glares sharply. A familiar face stands waiting, unimpressed. You're late, the voice says coldly, arms crossed sternly. Inside, a man named Hyun-seok sits on the sofa, surrounded by snacks. A white fluffy creature eyes the food with obvious delight. Why are you in my house? Hyun-seok asks flatly, eyes narrowing at Haram, who stands smugly. What a lovely welcome, Haram thinks. Hyun-seok frowns at Haram's short stature. You're still as small as ever, he mutters. The insult lands, but Haram chooses to ignore it. The fluffy creature munches on chips loudly. You're small because you eat this garbage, Hyun-seok points out, unimpressed. Haram snorts indignantly. Haram scowls but sighs dramatically. I don't grow anyway, genius, they reply sarcastically. Hyun-seok smirks, but Haram knows the conversation is over. Haram stands in the darkness, recounting how monsters once ripped away limbs. But I've given up, they say, voice eerily calm. Hyun-seok listens, arms crossed. The tension remains, but he notes Haram's presence has hardly changed since their last chaotic encounter. Your looks are still crazy looking, Hyun-seok remarks bluntly. Haram shrugs, their small stature making the comment sting more than it should. Haram frowns slightly, staring at him. Why did the branch manager come to my doorstep? Haram wonders, pretending not to care. You wouldn't show up just to snipe my food, Haram mutters under their breath, sensing there's more to his sudden visit. Hyun-seok takes a sip, his expression serious. The Hero Association detected traces of monster energy. It's urgent, Haram, he says coldly. Haram listens but drinks from their can, unbothered. Hyun-seok continues. The code name is Black Marauder. We've found leads, but it's unstable. Hyun-seok leans back, explaining further. We've also traced this energy to the location of the ultimate hero's awakening, he adds, emphasizing its importance. Haram freezes for a moment, their mind racing. The other world's power. Am I a monster? They question internally, trying to hide surprise. Hyun-seok holds up a device, eyes sharp. You'll need to pass this scan to clear suspicion, he states firmly, offering no compromise. Haram scowls, narrowing their eyes. An otherworld detector, they whisper, fists clenched slightly. The tension fills the room, neither moving immediately. Without resistance, Haram sighs. Do as you like, they mutter, stepping into place reluctantly as the device powers up with a hum. The handheld scanner emits a green glow, pulsing ominously. Haram stands still, watching Hyun-seok carefully while maintaining a blank expression. Hyun-seok remains focused, holding the scanner steadily. The device emits loud beeps, the green light scanning every part of Haram's frame. The scanner goes silent. Haram lowers their head slightly, expression unreadable. Their silence says more than words could at that moment. Hyun-suk lowers the device, checking its result. He stays silent for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, as Haram watches him impatiently. The scanner reads clear, with a faint beep. Otherworld density is 0.2%. Contamination intensity normal, it states, confirming Haram's clean result. Congratulations on being cleared of all cases, Haram Lee, Hyun-suk announces in a flat tone, though Haram rolls their eyes at the formality. Really, that's a relief, Haram mutters sarcastically, flopping onto the couch. Now stop eating my snacks already and hurry up and leave. Hyun-suk straightens up and sighs. We still have something to discuss. Should I even bother leaving this up to you? Judging by your usual demeanor, Hyun-suk continues with a smirk, you're hardly a role model for anyone. Haram glares, irritated already. Haram jumps up angrily, pointing at him. What about my demeanor, huh? You prick? At least pay for my drinks first. Hyun-suk shrugs. I'm going to take a call, he announces, pulling out his phone and ignoring Haram's frustrated ranting completely. Haram grumbles, turning away. What is it, octopus head? They ask over the phone, voice sharp as the situation clearly grows more serious. The monster has been confirmed again, the voice says sternly. Haram raises an eyebrow and mutters, Oh yeah, I forgot about that. The voice continues. You'll need to handle it and rebuild the new hero's image. Make it match my personality perfectly. Haram stares at the phone, confused. What kind of nonsense are you asking for now? That'll cost more than we can afford. The voice hesitates before answering. The Korean branch of the Hero Association is looking for you, they explain. Haram suddenly freezes in shock. Haram's face twists in disbelief. The Hero Association, how did it escalate this far, they think, clearly frustrated by the growing chaos. With a tired sigh, Haram opens the door. I'm back, they say to Hyun-suk. What now? Skip to the main point already. Hyun-suk leans back in his chair, holding a document. Haram Lee, he says, flipping a page slowly. Ever thought about an apprentice? The paper reveals details about a new candidate. Name, Seon Park, age 16, awakening type magical girl. A golden light shimmers behind her. Haram frowns, looking unconvinced. A single day to train her? Haram thinks, flipping through Seon's listed abilities. Where could I even put her? The document lists insane abilities, telekinesis, lightning magic, healing magic, and even near-future precognition. Haram blinks, muttering, What kind of story is this? Hyun-suk gestures to the paper again. Read below that. Haram skims quickly, freezing mid-sentence. Crazy, they mutter, eyes widening at what follows. Haram reads the report aloud, their tone dropping. Black Marauder. The title rings ominously, as if the words carry a hidden weight. Standing still, Haram's shadow distorts unnaturally, taking on a sinister figure. Glowing eyes stare back, reflecting something darker lurking beneath the surface. Lee Haram sat in the office, listening as the advisor questioned her future. The weight of expectations felt heavier than ever. Meanwhile, Baek Sumi's awakening had finally arrived. Today marked the beginning of something far beyond anyone's control. The report classified a new threat, Black Marauder, a dangerous individual with a power level capable of unsettling the balance. Haram stared at the name, confused. Why would someone like her be connected to such a title? Her shadow twisted unnaturally beneath her, hinting at the dark force she hadn't yet understood. The document confirmed it wasn't an organization, but a single person labeled as a top-tier threat. The upper office predicted that the Black Marauder could rival the strongest villains, capable of devastating the world. Haram doubted the assessment. Could someone mirroring her truly be that powerful? Yet the advisor warned her. The Marauder might surpass even her abilities or evolve into something unstoppable. The solution was clear. Take the Marauder as her disciple, a chance to guide or restrain this threat. Haram thought it through. Keeping a potential enemy close would let her monitor and possibly shape the Marauder's ideology. Still, she couldn't ignore practical concerns. She casually asked how much compensation she'd get for taking on this burden. The offer of support for two people wasn't impressive, but enough to keep her interested. Smirking, she agreed, deciding to see how things would unfold with the Marauder under her watch. Yet she pushed for better living arrangements, arguing that their small space couldn't handle 3 people. Hyun-suk firmly refused, warning Lee Haram about interfering with someone else's story and the consequences it could bring. Haram smirked, seeing this as the perfect excuse to confront Black Marauder without holding back. Without another word, Hyun-suk turned away, hinting that next time they'd meet, Hero Baek Si-hyun would be introduced. Haram's expression hardened. She silently vowed to give her all, embracing the challenge ahead. Alone, Haram stood by the door, whispering her resolve to herself. This was all for justice. Night settled over the city as Haram sat quietly in the dimly lit apartment, deep in thought. Unho, noticing Haram's silence, tilted his head, sensing something was off. Concerned, Unho asked what was wrong, his soft tone breaking the heavy stillness. Haram casually teased him about his weight, masking her true concerns with humor. Changing the subject, she inquired about the reaction Unho sensed from Hyun-seok during their tense meeting. Unho hesitated, questioning if Haram was starting to doubt her friends after that conversation. Haram firmly stated that Hyun-seok wasn't there as a friend, but as the branch chief, bound by duty. She admitted her role was to disrupt that very order Hyun-seok was trying to maintain. Unho reflected, admitting he didn't sense any lies from Hyun-seok, only honesty in his words. Haram, thoughtful, agreed. It wasn't just Unho's lie-detecting ability. It was her own instinct to trust, though cautiously. Unho recalled feeling fear when the device was revealed, its purpose cloaked in uncertainty and threat. That fear shifted into resignation, as though the outcome had already been decided, leaving little room for resistance. When the results flashed clear, doubt still lingered, suggesting that not everything was as simple as it seemed. Haram accepted the outcome, confident in her decision to take the magical girl in as a disciple. Unho questioned whether Haram had considered doubting someone she hadn't even met, but Haram trusted her instincts. Haram playfully dismissed Unho's concern, knowing that in situations like this, there was no one else she could trust. A sudden realization made Haram pause. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping into her mind. As she stroked Unho thoughtfully, she pondered the meaning behind this new transformation's connection to another world. The codename Black Marauder echoed in her mind. This power wasn't ordinary. It originated from beyond their reality. Haram revisited the report on Baek Si-hyun, wondering how this connection to the magical girl could reshape everything. Visions of the Black Marauder's dark power swirled, suggesting this transformation was no accident but a deliberate change. Haram grew more uneasy, questioning why this new power felt so unnatural despite being marked as clear. Suddenly she grabbed Unho, demanding answers. Why had her powers transformed in such an unfamiliar way? Unho panicked, unsure how to explain. Did this transformation mean she had fallen into a trap without realizing it? Haram narrowed her eyes, half joking but half serious, asking if Unho was secretly her enemy. Unho felt the weight of responsibility. With monsters appearing alongside their partners, he knew he had to act carefully. He asked Haram to keep everything a secret, fearing the consequences if the truth about the other world spread. Unho revealed that monsters dig holes into the other world, creating a path for invasion. The power of heroes stabilizes within their bodies, preventing it from spreading and destroying the world. Haram calmly acknowledged this, surprising Unho, who had never shared this information in 30 years. Haram questioned the rise of heroes, wondering how many had been sacrificed without understanding the cause. Unho explained that the contamination had already begun, connecting their world to another. Haram realized Unho had only transferred power to her, but never fully detected the contamination before. The overwhelming energy hinted that a rift might have already formed, making immediate danger more likely. Haram's transformation deepened as the spreading power became harder to contain. Haram wondered if failing to contain the power would open a hole between worlds. Unho reluctantly confirmed the possibility. Strangely, there was little contamination nearby, suggesting the power was being absorbed instead of spreading. Frustrated, Haram felt overwhelmed, unable to make sense of the strange energy surrounding her. She decided to head out and confront the first hero she encountered, desperate for answers. Unho quietly watched her leave, softly telling her to take care. In the dark arena, a fierce battle was unfolding. A massive serpent loomed as two figures faced each other. The red-haired girl, a healing-type magical girl, was unaware of the looming threat stalking her. From the shadows, Haram spotted her target. She didn't want to harm a non-combatant, but it was necessary. She realized that being merciless here would accelerate the spread of fear, achieving her goal faster. With a burst of dark energy, Haram launched herself forward, ready to strike. The red-haired girl quickly sensed the danger and summoned her power, demanding, "Who are you?" But before she could react, Haram's chilling presence made her hesitate. Recognition flashed in the healer's eyes. A hero attacker was targeting her. Gripping her weapon tightly, the healer lunged forward, trying to strike first. But Haram remained calm, analyzing every move as she prepared to counter. Haram assessed the healer's tactics, quick thinking but too slow. Her heart and head were in the right place, but it wasn't enough. Dark energy coiled around Haram as she dashed toward her opponent with deadly precision. The healer braced herself, but Haram already knew her next move: strike fast and hard. Haram planned to break the girl's arms and knock her out before she could even feel pain. Closing the distance in a flash, Haram prepared to end the fight swiftly and mercilessly. The red-haired girl tightened her grip, her eyes narrowing with focus. She wasn't backing down despite the overwhelming pressure. Haram lunged forward, dark energy crackling. She was surprised. The girl was preparing to take the attack head-on. She's using her head to block? Haram thought, thrown off by such a reckless move. Frustrated, Haram clicked her tongue and shifted her stance, deciding to adjust her strategy. With a burst of energy, Haram retreated into the shadows, leaving behind a dense cloud of smoke. The red-haired girl charged forward, slashing through the smoke, determined to end the fight before it dragged on. Haram smirked. A bold move, she mused, watching the girl expose herself to protect her arms. She's risking her life just to save her arms? Why would she go that far? Haram pondered. Blood dripped as the girl covered her head, her breathing heavy but unwavering. Without hesitation, Haram dashed forward again, realizing this wasn't just a fight, it was survival. Haram lunged forward with dark energy swirling around her. No accidents, no witnesses. This fight must end swiftly, she thought. The red-haired girl braced herself, sensing Haram's next strike would be devastating. She tightened her stance, preparing to counter. Pain shot through her arm as Haram's relentless attacks forced her to retreat. She struggled to stay standing, gritting her teeth. Haram narrowed her eyes. Strange. Why isn't she fighting back? The hesitation felt deliberate. Something wasn't adding up. The girl's steady gaze met Haram's. Because behind me, she whispered, revealing her hidden reason for holding back. Under the moonlit sky, Haram finally saw the truth. A frightened civilian cowered in the shadows. This wasn't just a battle. Abin Han stared ahead, her grip tightening. The tension in the air hinted at the danger lurking in the shadows. Under the pale moonlight, Abin stood guard, watching Li Haram approach cautiously with an injured civilian struggling behind her. Li Haram's cold glare sharpened. She only targeted heroes, ignoring anyone else. Civilians were never her concern. Abin smirked, realizing Li Haram wouldn't harm bystanders. But that same hesitation could be used against her. Sensing Abin's thoughts, Haram unleashed dark energy, ready to strike. Her opponent wouldn't slip away so easily this time. Haram's voice cut through the night, asking if Abin planned to hide behind others forever instead of fighting. Abin's mind flashed back to the injured civilian. Maybe she had been too quick to act like a righteous hero. Dark energy spiraled around Haram as she summoned her weapon, eyes glowing fiercely. The fight was far from over. Raising her weapon, Haram's power surged. She was determined to finish what they had started without any more distractions. The air cracked with energy as Haram lunged forward. The battle between light and dark was about to explode again. Abin gritted her teeth, raising her glowing sword. With a fierce cry, she slashed forward, light tearing through the air. Haram swiftly dodged, her silhouette slicing through the darkness like a shadow, barely touched by Abin's deadly strike. Abin pressed forward, but Haram's dark energy clashed violently with her blade, sending sparks and shockwaves around them. Shadows and light battled in midair as Haram's scythe collided with Abin's sword, neither willing to back down. Breathing heavily, Abin let out a small laugh. This fight was far from over, and she was ready for more. Li Haram observed Abin Han with a glint of respect. Despite the chaos, Abin's determination never wavered for a second. Abin stood firm, gripping her bow tightly. Even without special powers, she refused to back down from this fight. Haram questioned how long Abin had fought this battle. 4 years, and her only strength was relentless healing. Dropping her hero title, Abin faced Haram directly, revealing her true name, Han Abin. No masks, no pretense. Haram's eyes narrowed. She would remember that name. This fight had now become something far more personal. Shadows twisted around Haram as she readied another attack, but a sudden shift in the air made her pause. Abin sensed the same thing, her instincts screaming. Something dangerous was closing in fast, catching them both off guard. Without warning, blue energy tore through the night sky, forcing Haram to leap away from its devastating path. Haram's grip tightened. That wasn't Abin's doing. Another powerful presence had entered the battlefield, one neither of them expected. A distant figure stood in the shadows, Baek Si-hyun. Her warning was clear. This was no ordinary enemy. A burst of magic streaked through the air, barely missing its target. Haram's sharp reflexes saved her from destruction. Abin's eyes widened. How had Haram dodged something that fast? It didn't make sense. From afar, Baek Si-hyun's calm voice echoed. This opponent wasn't just dangerous, it was beyond comprehension. Floating beside her, a small fairy companion hovered, watching the battlefield with tense curiosity. Baek Si-hyun sighed, blood trickling down her lip. She had hoped victory was within reach, but now she wasn't so sure. Baek Si-hyun steadied herself, brushing off the dust. Whatever, she muttered. Now it was time to fight directly. Abin Han watched as Si-hyun rose to her feet, determined. Are you all right? Abin asked, worry flashing in her eyes. Si-hyun extended her hand, but Abin hesitated. Si-hyun reassured her, I can heal myself, no need to worry. Abin's eyes widened in disbelief. Si-hyun healed herself so effortlessly as if it was second nature. Si-hyun smirked confidently, brushing off any doubt. Now it was time to focus on the real threat ahead. Abin remained still as Si-hyun's confident grin grew. Now then, she whispered, ready to face Lee Haram once more. With a swift motion, Si-hyun readied her weapon. She would handle this opponent no matter how dangerous. Haram stood firm, shadows swirling around her. The air thickened as both sides prepared for the next brutal clash. Si-hyun's weapon wasn't just for show, it was a hammer meant to crush. Paired with her resilience, it was deadly. Charging forward, Si-hyun's presence grew heavier. Her hammer glowed with power as she aimed straight for Haram. Haram watched Si-hyun closely. Wielding such a heavy weapon recklessly could easily open her up for devastating counters. But to Haram's shock, Si-hyun blocked the strike with a broken stance, holding firm despite the overwhelming force. Haram's eyes narrowed. Si-hyun's strength wasn't just brute force, it was skill honed through countless battles. Realizing a standard attack wouldn't work, Haram shifted tactics. She had to strike before Si-hyun could recover. With a sharp twist, Haram launched a powerful counterattack, her dark energy slicing through the air towards Si-hyun. Lee Haram unleashed a surge of dark energy, her weapon glowing ominously as she lunged toward Baek Si-hyun. But Si-hyun remained calm, a faint smirk forming. She subtly activated her hidden power, halting Haram's advance. Psychokinesis. Si-hyun's mind-controlled force effortlessly redirected Haram's deadly attack, throwing her off balance. Haram's eyes narrowed. Every one of her strikes was being effortlessly countered. This wasn't just skill, it was overwhelming power. Even Haram hesitated. Could Si-hyun really be manipulating the battle with such precision using psychokinesis alone? Haram's grip tightened. On top of that, psychokinesis? The realization hit harder than any physical blow. Si-hyun smiled playfully, pretending not to understand. What are you talking about? She teased. But Haram wasn't fooled. Lies, she muttered. That much power wasn't normal, not for a newly awakened hero. The name Baek Si-hyun stirred something familiar in Haram. This wasn't an ordinary opponent. Baek Si-hyun, wasn't she that newly awakened hero? Haram questioned, feeling a deeper threat emerging. Lee Haram's eyes widened in realization. Ah, so she's my disciple, she thought, surprised by Si-hyun's rapid progress. It was astonishing. Si-hyun controlled her powers so naturally, despite awakening just 2 days ago. A smirk tugged at Haram's lips. She's a genius, she admitted, impressed by her disciple's raw potential. Compared to how clumsy she once was, Si-hyun had become remarkably powerful in such a short time. Si-hyun's confident voice snapped Haram back. What are you standing there for? Aren't you coming? She challenged boldly. Lee Haram glared at Baek Si-hyun. Can't you just come at me yourself? She snapped. Si-hyun smirked. No way. Realization hit Haram. Si-hyun wasn't reacting randomly. She was anticipating every move. Something deeper was at play here. Si-hyun's ability couldn't show every possible future. It only revealed the best possible outcome in each situation. Haram narrowed her eyes. Si-hyun relied heavily on her power, but that overdependence left her vulnerable. You're revealing all your weaknesses, Haram muttered, a dark grin forming. Now, she knew how to break Si-hyun down. How clumsy, Haram thought before shouting, Han Abin! Her sharp tone cut through the chaos. Startled, Abin straightened up. Yes, she stammered, caught off guard by Haram's sudden command. Haram didn't flinch, her piercing gaze focused. She had no time for hesitation. Evacuate all the civilians, Haram ordered coldly, not breaking eye contact. Abin hesitated. But weren't you the one who brought them here? Haram smirked slyly. Well, let's just say plans change. Lee Haram radiated dark energy, her presence growing heavier. I won't hold back anymore, she thought, fully embracing her power. A surge of energy exploded upward, shaking the ground. The shockwave rippled across the city, signaling the start of chaos. Baek Si-hyun leapt into action, gripping her weapon tightly. She couldn't afford to falter against Haram's overwhelming strength. Abinhan braced herself, shielding the civilians. The fierce battle ahead would decide everything, and she had to stay focused. Si-hyun glared at Haram. You are no hero. You're just playing with lives, she muttered, steadying her stance. A wicked smile spread across Haram's face. Let's play until you get tired, she taunted, shadows swirling around her. The Hero Association's alert blared across the city, warning everyone of an imminent and deadly threat approaching fast. Lee Haram stood at the center of the chaos, her aura pulsing as she prepared to unleash her devastating power. The ground shattered beneath her feet as Lee Haram's energy surged, signaling the start of an overwhelming force. Buildings trembled, and alarms screamed as the city plunged into panic, civilians scrambling to escape the destruction. From a distance, Baek Si-hyun watched in shock, realizing Lee Haram was now unleashing her full strength. Baek Si-hyun faced Rin, both tense as they observed the terrifying display of Lee Haram's overwhelming power. Rin's expression darkened as she analyzed Lee Haram's strength. Every shockwave stemmed purely from raw physical force. Lee Haram, surrounded by destructive energy, moved with unmatched strength, pushing beyond the limits of human ability. Baek Si-hyun and Rin exchanged uneasy glances, both realizing Lee Haram wasn't even using her full power yet. Lee Haram stood unshaken, her eyes focused as the ground cracked beneath her growing, uncontrollable energy. Baek Si-hyun winced as a deafening, painful sound pierced her ears, making it hard to maintain her focus. Clutching her head, Baek Si-hyun struggled against the overwhelming noise, feeling the pressure intensify around her. In the distance, Lee Haram stood resolute, her presence radiating pure destructive energy, causing the air to tremble. The ground crumbled beneath Lee Haram as she prepared to strike, her strength unmatched and terrifying to witness. Baek Si-hyun stared in disbelief. How could Lee Haram, once an ally, wield such monstrous and devastating power? Lee Haram glared at Baek Si-hyun, her patience thinning. Their conflicting ideals of justice clashed, igniting rising tension. With a cold grip on her weapon, Lee Haram dismissed the idea of heroism, driven solely by her personal convictions. Neither backed down as they prepared to battle, both standing firm in their beliefs about what justice truly meant. Baek Si-hyun analyzed Lee Haram, realizing that her defiance stemmed from something far deeper than mere rebellion. Baek Si-hyun invoked the legacy of the original Crimson Hammer, claiming that true justice was far beyond Lee Haram's grasp. Lee Haram's smirk deepened, her confidence unwavering as she readied herself to strike without hesitation. Yet a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Was Baek Si-hyun admiring her or mocking her strength? Lee Haram silenced the thought, lunging forward with a fierce, devastating attack aimed to overpower Baek Si-hyun. Baek Si-hyun reacted swiftly, summoning a glowing shield to absorb the impact, holding her ground under pressure. Watching Baek Si-hyun struggle, Lee Haram sneered, casually dismissing her as nothing more than an amateur. Lee Haram's weapon struck hard, causing Baek Si-hyun's barrier to fracture, thin cracks spreading under the impact. Sensing vulnerability, Lee Haram quickly shifted her stance, adjusting her attack with precise, deadly intent. Lee Haram launched into the air, twisting midair to unleash a powerful strike from above. Her foot slammed into Baek Si-hyun's shield, the force shaking the ground as the barrier barely held together. Baek Si-hyun clenched her fists, realizing she was facing not just brute strength, but Lee Haram's ruthless determination. Lee Haram launched herself into the air, radiating dark energy as Baek Si-hyun tracked her movement, preparing to strike. Baek Si-hyun quickly adjusted her stance, identifying Haram's attack angle as she prepared for a fierce counter. Haram's assault crashed down, releasing a violent shockwave that rattled the ground and sent debris flying. With relentless force, Haram continued her onslaught, forcing Baek Si-hyun to strain against the overwhelming pressure. Baek Si-hyun realized Lee Haram's power wasn't just brute strength. It was calculated destruction designed to break her. A sly grin spread across Lee Haram's face as she taunted Baek Si-hyun for relying too heavily on foresight. Struggling to recover, Baek Si-hyun cursed under her breath, infuriated by Haram's mocking confidence. Yet Haram acknowledged Baek Si-hyun's tenacity, though she doubted it would make any difference in this fight. A dark thought crept into Haram's mind. Was Baek Si-hyun truly fighting for justice or driven by revenge? Haram smirked, fully aware the Hero Association would soon panic over the chaos she had unleashed. Surrounded by ominous eyes, Lee Haram embraced her identity as the Black Marauder, relishing the fear she instilled. Confident in the destruction left behind, Lee Haram calmly retreated, satisfied with the devastation she had caused. Baek Si-hyun's furious screams echoed, vowing to defeat Haram no matter how long it would take. But Haram had already vanished, leaving only ruin and a society trembling at her growing influence. News reports buzzed about the large-scale attack, highlighting the damage and the panic spreading throughout the city. A serious announcement from the Hero Association echoed, addressing the recent chaos caused by the destructive incident. Lee Haram sat in her room, her sharp gaze narrowing as she struggled to sense any life signs nearby. She questioned herself. Maybe her power control had dulled after being inactive for so long. On the screen, Tae-joon Kim, the Hero Association's representative, reported a powerful, otherworldly presence classified as an A-rank threat. Alarmed, Lee Haram turned to Eunho, the small, mink-like creature, asking if he could sense the strange energy. Eunho, lazily nibbling on his snack, looked up and asked Lee Haram what exactly he was supposed to feel. Lee Haram mentioned sensing a faint trace of emotional manipulation radiating from Tae-joon Kim during his speech. Watching the broadcast, Lee Haram pondered whether this manipulation happened every time the Hero Association made a statement. Eunho agreed it was subtle but warned that continuous exposure could have dangerous long-term effects, prompting Haram's concern. In the middle of the press conference, a reporter stood up, ready to confront the Hero Association with a critical question. During the tense press conference, a reporter boldly questioned the Hero Association, hinting that the Black Marauder resembled a hero. Sitting silently at home, Lee Haram listened closely, her expression unreadable, while Eunho munched on his snack beside her. The official addressed the nation, revealing the terrifying truth. A monster perfectly replicated a hero's powers, sparking widespread concern. A reporter questioned why such a destructive force was only classified as a weak monster, causing murmurs in the room. Evidence showed the monster's single weapon swing leveled the city, yet it remained underwhelmingly categorized, raising further suspicion. Watching the broadcast, Lee Haram was shocked that the reporter openly mentioned Drank, a top priority target, on live TV. Lee Haram smirked, impressed by the reporter's boldness. Still, the situation felt dangerously tangled beyond what the public knew. The official stated it hadn't been labeled a common enemy yet, explaining the hesitation in classification. Lee Haram, watching the broadcast, silently noted how bold the reporter was for mentioning the UN so openly. The official warned that labeling the Black Marauder as a common enemy could have unpredictable consequences if defeated by another party. Lee Haram stared at the TV, realizing how messy the situation had become, knowing her previous actions contributed to the chaos. Suddenly, Lee Haram's phone vibrated, a call from Octopus Head, breaking her train of thought. Lee Haram casually answered the call, smirking as she greeted Octopus Head, curious about what he wanted. Annoyed, Al-Shel insisted she use his real name, reminding her of their business partnership. Al-Shel explained he had chosen an organization to collaborate with, one focused on handling crime monsters. He promised to send the details later, noting the group had several C-rank monsters and skilled sorceress, though still small. Lee Haram raised an eyebrow. An organization that dangerous, hiding in South Korea? That sounded more serious than she expected. Near the Great Barrier at the North Korean border, the atmosphere was tense with an ominous glow in the sky. Lee Haram, watching the news, calmly asked about the deadline for the task, showing no sign of worry. Eunho lay comfortably on Lee Haram, undisturbed by the tense atmosphere surrounding them. Baek Si-hyun stood confidently, her intense aura filling the space as she prepared to make her declaration. With unwavering determination, Baek Si-hyun declared herself as Crimson Hammer's student and the one destined to defeat the Black Marauder. Watching Si-hyun's outburst, Lee Haram sighed, realizing how chaotic things might get with her involved. Lee Haram's apartment stood quietly from the outside, masking the chaos brewing within. Lee Haram casually asked for the new girl's name, curious about her unexpected arrival. Cheerfully, Si-hyun introduced herself, excited to begin training. Beside her, Abin-han quietly introduced herself as well. Lee Haram questioned Hyun-suk about why she had two students, but he casually said he would explain later. Lee Haram questioned if the Black Marauder was a threat to both magical girls, trying to piece things together. Hyun-seok clarified that Abin-han wasn't connected to the monster and promised to provide more information soon. Si-hyun seemed a bit overwhelmed but remained determined as she prepared for intense training. Both girls eagerly agreed to be trained, even if it meant risking their lives. Si-hyun boldly declared she was ready to put her life on the line, fully committed to the mission ahead. Lee Haram questioned Abin-han's commitment, curious if she truly desired strength beyond reason. Abin-han hesitated but clenched her fist, determined to become stronger no matter the cost. With fierce conviction, Abin declared she would do anything to gain more power and improve herself. Lee Haram stared at Abin thoughtfully, recognizing the same fire of determination she once had. Calmly, Lee Haram told Hyun-seok to dull his senses, warning she was about to remove her limiter temporarily. Hyun-seok quietly followed orders, setting aside his glasses in preparation for what was to come. Si-hyun and Abin-han exchanged surprised glances, puzzled by the mention of Lee Haram's limiter. Si-hyun's eyes widened in shock as she watched Lee Haram remove her limiter, sensing the overwhelming power. The room trembled as shards of debris scattered, her power breaking free without restraint. With cold eyes, Lee Haram criticized herself, noting how she couldn't control her power without limiting her emotions. Amidst the wreckage, Lee Haram asked if the girls were truly ready to endure her brutal training. Si-hyun, unwavering, boldly affirmed her admiration for Lee Haram's power, embracing the challenge. Lee Haram shifted her gaze to Abin-han, waiting for her response. Abin nervously admitted she didn't know much about Lee Haram but respected his expertise in handling D-rank subjugations. Driven by determination, Abin-han declared her willingness to become Lee Haram's student if it meant gaining real strength. Lee Haram sat silently, lost in thought, reflecting on the overwhelming power she had just unleashed. A broken tissue box lay on the ground, a small reminder of the destruction she caused in the room. She slouched on the couch, surrounded by the aftermath, still processing everything that had happened. Hyun-suk calmly asked if she was done, breaking the tense silence that filled the room. Si-hyun smiled brightly, eagerly agreeing to the first lesson, never calling Lee Haram by her hero name. Abin Han softly agreed, calling her Sunbae Haram, ready to follow her guidance. Lee Haram stood up, ending the session for the day, instructing the girls to head home. Hyun-suk told Abin and Si-hyun to leave first, mentioning he still needed to talk with Lee Haram. A feather floated softly in the air, marking the end of their intense day. Si-hyun, smiling at Abin, was relieved their training had begun, excited for what was ahead. The door clicked shut and locked after Si-hyun and Abin left, leaving Lee Haram and Hyun-suk alone. Lee Haram turned to face Hyun-suk, her expression serious and demanding answers. She sharply questioned Hyun-seok about why he exposed Si-hyun to the press. Frustration building, she demanded to know why he didn't stop Si-hyun from acting recklessly. Pointing directly at him, Lee Haram angrily asked why he allowed Si-hyun to break into the conference hall. Hyun-seok's expression remained cold and unreadable as he listened to Lee Haram's heated accusations. Calmly, he revealed that exposing Si-hyun to the press was an order from higher-ups beyond his control. Lee Haram scoffed, refusing to believe it, feeling like they were using Si-hyun as a disposable pawn. Lee Haram worried that the media would relentlessly target Si-hyun every time they failed to defeat the Black Marauder. With a serious expression, Lee Haram prepared to ask Hyun-suk one more pressing question. Hatred filled the air as graffiti cursed awakeners, blaming them for the destruction and the loss of innocent lives. Lee Haram, her voice steady, questioned if the association's true goal was to prevent future heroes from suffering like they did. Coldly, Hyun-suk justified his actions, claiming he was merely following orders from his superiors without questioning their intent. Lee Haram sensed something unusual in the room. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the ceiling, feeling an unsettling presence. Spotting a small glowing red light above, she realized it wasn't just a coincidence. Someone was watching her every move. Calmly, she reached for a small hidden device in her hand, confirming her suspicion that the room was being monitored. With swift precision, Haram summoned her energy blade, slicing through the air toward the hidden camera without hesitation. The device shattered on impact, pieces scattering across the floor. The surveillance was cut off, but trust was already broken. The remnants of the shattered device lay among the debris, its pieces now powerless to spy on her any longer. Clenching her fist, Haram felt frustration boiling inside. How could they invade her space so easily without her knowing? It's a listening device, she realized, glaring at the pieces. No matter how carefully she chose the hotel, they found her. She couldn't believe the extent of their surveillance. If they bugged every room, escaping their grasp would be nearly impossible. Outside the hotel, the sun was setting, but the danger hadn't passed. They underestimated the threat, making this situation worse. She recalled how someone had been assigned to protect her, but now it felt more like she was being watched instead. Yet it wasn't an order from above, it was a personal choice. He had willingly decided to protect her himself. Hyun-seok looked at Lee Haram with determination and asked her to protect the girl, trusting her strength completely. Lee Haram paused, reflecting on Hyun-seok's decision. It wasn't just responsibility. It was a choice driven by trust and conviction. A sly smile crept onto Haram's face. She knew her best friend would never back down from this decision. Lee Haram questioned Hyun-seok about Abin Han, wondering how someone like her could be so vulnerable in this situation. Hyun-seok calmly told Lee Haram not to rank heroes, reminding her that every hero has their own unique path and struggles. Despite understanding, Lee Haram still saw Abin as objectively weak, recognizing that her abilities were far below others. She acknowledged that Abin as a hero was similar to herself, struggling but still standing firm against adversity. Hyun-suk explained that Abin couldn't even release mana properly, unlike Lee Haram, making her situation even more difficult. Lee Haram understood the situation better now. She decided to take responsibility and personally train Abin to strengthen her resolve. Hyun-suk was relieved by her understanding, urging her to set up the training environment quickly for Abin's safety. As Hyun-suk was about to leave, Lee Haram suddenly called out to him, stopping him in his tracks. With a sincere tone, Lee Haram thanked Hyun-suk for not changing, quietly appreciating his trust and unwavering belief in her. The view of the hotel from the outside remained calm that day, hiding the storm of decisions unfolding within its walls. After a few days, Lee Haram sat confidently, introducing herself as Abin Han's master, and informing them they would live together. She bluntly stated she wouldn't teach magic for fun, but would focus solely on survival tactics and practical combat. Her expression hardened as she emphasized survival. The goal wasn't flashy magic, it was learning how to outlast stronger enemies. She warned them that running away, even when it felt shameful, was sometimes the only path to survival. Curious but cautious, Haram questioned them further, asking how much they truly understood about the lurking danger of D ranks. Lee Haram explained the difference between strength and power, reminding Aben that being the strongest doesn't always define true strength. Aben seemed unsure, struggling to grasp the concept of strength beyond mere rankings and physical abilities. Lee Haram acknowledged Aben's answer, but pointed out that both of them misunderstood the true nature of strength. She explained that O ranks are being so powerful that they create their own worlds, existing beyond ordinary comprehension. Their overwhelming power allows them to reshape reality itself, a force far beyond anything Aben or Haram had encountered. Lee Haram suggested looking at an example to explain the terrifying power of O ranks more clearly. She spoke of the story of a crazed magical girl whose actions were recorded in the annals of history. This was the O rank battle record, an event tied to the infamous crazed magical girl happiness drop. Amid a stormy battlefield, Lee Haram observed the unsettling rain, realizing its connection to the chaos around them. People were losing themselves in the rain, and Haram noted that even the strongest seemed powerless against its strange effect. Watching the people in the rain, Lee Haram remarked how strangely happy they looked despite the looming danger. Thunder God, an R-rank awakener, teased Haram, questioning why she was wandering in the rain instead of fighting. Haram pointed out how those affected by the rain seemed oddly joyful, wondering if it was worth experiencing herself. Thunder God warned her that many were already dying, and going crazy wouldn't change the outcome or save anyone. When asked who died recently, Thunder God coldly replied, Boomer and Meteor, highlighting the brutal reality of their world. Lee Haram pondered how Boomer could fall in battle, but Meteor, a sniper, dying was far more puzzling. Through his scope, Meteor spotted the crazed magical girl and instantly lost his sanity, collapsing lifelessly on the spot. Haram realized Meteor must have gone on a rampage and was taken down by another ally before causing more harm. The mystery deepened with Boomer's death. His body showed no injuries, leaving everyone questioning what really happened. Haram mentioned a red flash seen before Boomer's fall. It wasn't much, but it hinted that something dangerous was unfolding. Lee Haram activated her weapon, its core glowing fiercely, readying herself for the inevitable battle ahead. She exhaled slowly, steadying her mind for the chaos about to erupt on the battlefield. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed in the distance, laughing maniacally, announcing the arrival of a terrifying threat. Despite the voice's eerie tone, Haram stayed composed, noting how clearly it carried across the distance. Without hesitation, her ally called out, and together they prepared to move forward, fully aware of the danger ahead. The group gathered, facing the overwhelming enemy. One of them asked who would make the first move. Lee Haram and the heavenly demon Sakar Soto stepped forward, determined to lead the charge against the enemy forces. When asked how many enemies he could handle, Sakar confidently responded that he could eliminate around 85% of them. Lee Haram teased him, asking if he had enough energy left to fight, pushing him to prove his strength. Sakar smirked, warning her not to tell him how to swing his hammer. The battle was about to begin. Lee Haram warned Sakar Soto to worry about himself first, but Sakar confidently claimed he would outlive everyone on the battlefield. In the distance, sinister laughter echoed through the storm, as the crazed magical girl reveled in the chaos she created. With a twisted smile, she mockingly asked if they also wanted to be happy with her, spreading fear and madness. A battalion of armored mechanical soldiers stands in formation, their weapons raised. The air crackles with tension as they await further orders. Lee Haram tightens her grip on her weapon, her expression cold. She assesses the battlefield, confirming their current energy reserves. The older man beside her remains calm, giving her a reassuring glance. But she stays focused, ready for what's coming next. Laughter echoes across the battlefield, growing louder. A dark presence emerges, exuding a twisted energy that warps the air around them. Alshel grins widely, crimson eyes gleaming with madness. Her aura radiates pure chaos as she watches, eager to spread more destruction. Lee Haram remains unfazed, keeping her stance firm. She knows Alshel thrives in madness, but there's no time for games. Lightning crackles around her hammer as she swings it with force. The ground beneath her trembles, energy building into a massive surge. The impact creates a shockwave, distorting the battlefield. Everything is momentarily engulfed in light as the attack erupts. The sheer power of the strike radiates outward, warping the atmosphere. Lee Haram's focus remains unshaken as she presses forward. A fiery explosion follows, consuming everything in its path. The enemy forces are thrown into chaos, struggling against the overwhelming force. Lee Haram propels herself into the air, her hammer raised high. The battlefield shakes under the pressure of her presence. She brings the weapon down with devastating force, sending shockwaves across the ground. The impact causes massive destruction instantly. The mechanical soldiers scramble as debris and flames fill the battlefield. The once organized ranks are now thrown into disarray. The attack's energy spreads outward, overwhelming everything in its wake. The battlefield is now completely transformed by sheer force. Alshel cackles, completely unfazed by the destruction. Her eerie smile widens as she revels in the chaos, her eyes full of twisted excitement. The battlefield is filled with mechanical soldiers, their formation unbroken. From above, Lee Haram observes, ready to strike at the perfect moment. She isn't here to simply destroy. She has a purpose. Her gaze sharpens as she assesses the situation, calculating her next move. The energy around her shifts as she grips her weapon. She isn't aiming for mindless destruction. She's gathering them all into one place. A dark energy manifests before her, forming a weapon of immense power. The air hums with its overwhelming presence. With a powerful swing, the sword slices through the air, releasing a devastating force. The battlefield trembles under its sheer magnitude. The attack carves through the enemy lines, obliterating everything in its path. Sparks fly as mechanical soldiers are torn apart. The energy wave continues its course, cutting down rows of enemies in an instant. The battlefield erupts in chaos. Debris scatters across the field as the remnants of her strike settle. The once orderly formation is now in complete disarray. The sky is filled with falling wreckage, a testament to the destructive force unleashed. Silence briefly follows the devastation. Lee Haram watches with an unreadable expression. The battle isn't over yet. There's still more to be done before she can move forward. Lee Haram steadies herself, sensing the shift in momentum. She knows this fight is far from over. A sudden burst of golden energy shoots across the battlefield. A new force has entered, altering the course of the battle. Explosions ripple outward, illuminating the sky with radiant light. The air crackles with an overwhelming energy. Lee Haram watches as another fighter moves ahead. She prepares to follow suit, her focus unwavering. With determination in her eyes, she steps forward. The battle is still ongoing, and she has no intention of backing down now. Lee Haram stands her ground, staring at her airborne opponent. The tension between them is thick, with both preparing for the next move. A fiery force erupts from below as energy surges upward. The battlefield trembles under the sheer intensity of the clash. She watches the unfolding battle with sharp eyes. This situation should have been handled earlier, yet it has escalated far beyond expectations. Past battles flash through her mind. So many fallen warriors, so many sacrifices. The weight of it all lingers in her thoughts. This isn't just another skirmish. It's a battle born from consequences. Every decision made has led to this very moment. Lee Haram's expression hardens as her crimson eyes glow with power. She refuses to let this chaos spiral any further. A sudden burst of flame surges toward her, forcing her into action. There's no room for hesitation in this fight. The impact of the attack shakes the battlefield as her hammer meets the strike head-on. Sparks scatter in all directions. Her opponent recoils, clearly not expecting such resistance. The battle is no longer one-sided. It has turned into a brutal clash. Her voice cuts through the chaos, rejecting the idea of being treated as a mere pawn. This fight is far from over. A sinister presence stirs, distorting the battlefield. The air grows thick as an ominous force makes itself known. A dark voice echoes in her mind, whispering words that send a chill down her spine. This is something beyond her understanding. She feels her grip tightening as a strange force begins pulling at her body. The battlefield around her twists into something unnatural. Dark hands reach out, clawing toward her, their eerie glow pulsating with energy. The presence behind them grows stronger. Glowing eyes pierce through the darkness, filled with an unfathomable power. Whatever this entity is, it isn't something she can face alone. Lee Haram shouts as the dark force surrounding her intensifies. The battlefield shifts and the presence of something unnatural grows stronger. A massive serpent looms in the void, devouring a world. The concept of reality itself bends under the weight of this invasion. This phenomenon isn't unfamiliar. She's witnessed it before. The merging of dimensions is a terrifying force that cannot be left unchecked. Her focus sharpens as she grips her weapon. If she falters now, everything she's fought for will be swallowed into oblivion. In the distance, a mysterious figure watches her every move. The battle is far from over, and the stakes have never been higher. Memories of the past resurface, uncertainties, mysteries, and the unanswered questions surrounding Bhumi's death. It all connects to this moment. A pulsating red light engulfs the battlefield, signaling the emergence of something even more dangerous. The energy is unstable, unpredictable. A new weapon form materializes, shifting its function to close combat. The enemy reacts, recognizing the lethal nature of this transformation. The opposing forces don't hesitate, launching an immediate counterattack. The battlefield erupts into chaos as both sides clash with full force. Lee Haram charges forward, her movements precise and unwavering. She refuses to back down no matter how overwhelming the enemy becomes. A deadly arc of red energy slashes through the air, cutting through its target with precision. The battle intensifies in an instant. Lee Haram watches as her opponent recoils, momentarily caught off guard. This is the turning point she's been waiting for. The unnatural force continues to grow, twisting the battlefield into something unrecognizable. She realizes this fight won't be won through strength alone. Her thoughts race. She must find a way to counter this madness before it consumes everything. There's no room for hesitation now. Steeling her resolve, she lifts her weapon, ready for the final confrontation. This battle will decide everything, and she won't let it end in defeat. Lee Haram raised her weapon, her crimson eyes burning with determination. The battlefield was drenched in tension as she prepared to strike. With a powerful swing, she unleashed a deadly red arc. The energy cut through the air, its force capable of tearing through anything. The attack was overwhelming, forcing others to take cover. The red flash surged forward, consuming everything in its path with raw destruction. The strike landed, sending debris flying. The battlefield trembled under the force of the impact, leaving behind chaos and shattered ground. Lee Haram pressed forward, her relentless pursuit giving no chance for escape. Her expression showed only one intent: she wouldn't let her prey run. A massive golden light erupted, illuminating the battlefield. The energy crackled, signaling an overwhelming presence that sent shockwaves through the air. Lee Haram's opponent moved swiftly, taking advantage of the surge in power. She barely had a moment to react before the assault began. A powerful strike came her way, forcing her to brace herself. The impact was tremendous, sending ripples of energy through the battlefield. The battle intensified, each clash echoing with destructive force. Neither side could afford to falter, their attacks pushing each other to the limits. The force of the attack sent Lee Haram staggering. She gritted her teeth, her grip tightening. This wasn't over yet. A mechanical sound echoed as a drill-like weapon began to spin. The sheer size and power of the weapon radiated overwhelming force. The weapon extended, growing even more dangerous. The air vibrated as it revved up, ready to pierce through anything in its path. Lee Haram raised the weapon, her energy surging. She was ready to unleash a devastating blow that would end this battle in one strike. The attack was launched, shaking the battlefield with its sheer power. The sky seemed to tremble under the force of the impact. A fiery explosion erupted, engulfing the entire area in a mix of red and gold energy. The battlefield was left in chaos, the outcome uncertain. The impact sent the opponent crashing into the ground, the force of the attack shaking the battlefield. The storm raged on above them. Lightning flickered around the battlefield as Lee Haram stood firm, her presence radiating power. The enemy's fall didn't mean the battle was over. The two figures observed the fallen opponent from a distance, skepticism in their expressions. Doubt lingered. Was it truly over, or was there more? A moment of reflection settled in. The injuries sustained, the exhaustion creeping in. Yet survival meant there was still a fight left in them. A realization dawned. The battle had been brutal, but this wasn't just about winning. It was about understanding the depths of power they faced. Relief washed over them, though it was fleeting. A moment of reprieve didn't erase the weight of the battle that had just unfolded. They talked about the significance of what had happened, a mix of exhaustion and humor keeping the tension from completely overwhelming them. Thoughts drifted to the future. What came next after this long-fought struggle? The weight of responsibility loomed over them like an unshakable shadow. Blood dripped, staining the battlefield. Even in victory, there was no certainty. The enemy's presence still clung to the air like a curse. A chilling laughter echoed through the darkness. The battle might have been won, but true horror was yet to reveal itself. The fallen enemy stirred, their form grotesque and unsettling. A twisted grin formed, revealing that their suffering had only made them stronger. Corruption had taken root. The wounds refused to close, but instead of agony there was madness, an eerie joy in the midst of destruction. Blood poured endlessly, yet the enemy laughed. The sheer absurdity of it sent a chill down their spines, the horror sinking in. The determination to put an end to this madness solidified. They couldn't allow this corruption to spread any further, no matter the cost. A figure stepped forward, eyes resolute. This was no longer just a battle. It was a fight against something far more sinister. The enemy's twisted form remained motionless, their presence still haunting the battlefield. The rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of destruction. Survivors gathered, their expressions filled with uncertainty. The battle had ended, but the weight of the conflict still lingered in their hearts. Lee Haram stood alongside her ally, exhaustion evident in her posture. The fight had taken its toll, but there was no time for rest. The realization set in. Their journey wasn't over yet. The scars of battle would remain, a reminder of what they had endured. Somewhere in the distance, the echoes of the past whispered. The war was far from over, and new threats were already beginning to emerge. The army moved into position, their resolve unshaken. The battle for survival had shifted, and they were prepared to make their stand. A cry for humanity echoed across the battlefield. Every soldier knew the stakes. This war was bigger than any individual, a fight for the future. Orders were given, and the sky lit up with fire. The relentless barrage rained down, seeking to eliminate any lingering threats. In the aftermath of the attack, silence lingered. Smoke and flames painted the battlefield, yet something unnatural still lurked in the shadows. The eerie voice of the enemy sent chills down their spines. Despite everything, they had not yet been defeated. The horror was far from over. The aftermath was devastating. Wounded survivors lay scattered across the battlefield, groaning in pain as they struggled to comprehend what had happened. Lee Haram's eyes widened in shock. The bombardment hadn't just struck the enemy, it had landed among the Awakeners as well. Confusion filled her mind. Why had the Allied forces attacked them? There was no mistake. Their own side had turned against them. The battlefield trembled again, and she had no time to think. Something was coming, and she needed to act fast before it was too late. In the distance, the roar of an engine cut through the chaos. A vehicle sped toward them, but whether it was friend or foe remained unclear. The soldiers called out, concern evident in their voices. The battlefield was drenched in rain, and uncertainty hung heavy in the air. The figure rose, battered but alive. The sheer resilience was unsettling, a reminder that the battle had not truly ended yet. Lee Haram watched in disbelief as the soldiers moved to assist the fallen enemy. Something wasn't right. Their actions felt unnatural. A chilling realization set in. The words spoken didn't match the reality of the war they had been fighting. Something deeper was at play. Her expression hardened. If this was a betrayal, she had no intention of standing by. The situation had taken a dangerous turn. The soldier's expression twisted with unsettling conviction. His words were not of his own, but of something controlling him from within. The realization dawned. Mind control. The soldiers weren't acting of their own free will. Something had corrupted them entirely. The enemy was being hailed as a savior, a horrifying contrast to the truth Lee Haram knew. The battlefield had turned into a stage of deception. She clenched her fists. If the soldiers had fallen under the influence, reasoning with them wouldn't be an option anymore. Without hesitation, she prepared for battle. There was no time to waste. This manipulation had to be shattered before it spread any further. A surge of energy crackled in the sky, illuminating the battlefield. The storm of battle raged on, and the time for hesitation was over. Lee Haram moved swiftly, her determination unwavering. The enemy's control over the soldiers had to be broken, no matter the cost. The attack struck with immense force, tearing through the battlefield. It was a warning. She wouldn't hold back against those who had fallen under control. The enemy's influence was strong, but it wouldn't last. The battle had shifted, and the true fight was about to begin. A golden light shone in the distance, signaling that this confrontation was far from over. The real battle had only just begun. A sudden movement broke through the chaos as the figure dashed forward, a determined light flashing in their eyes. The battle was far from over. The air crackled with tension as the old warrior raised his weapon, his presence commanding attention. His expression was unreadable, filled with something deeper. Recognition dawned in Lee Haram's eyes as she stared at the familiar figure. Confusion and disbelief clashed within her as memories surfaced. Her voice trembled slightly as she called out, her emotions swirling in turmoil. The battlefield faded into the background as realization took hold. The sight before her felt surreal. Questions flooded her mind. Why was he here? And why was he standing against her now?